Karting Superstars has been out for just over a week now, and I've been spending a few hours getting to know it. I'm by no means 20 or 30 hours in, unfortunately, but these are still my early impressions on the early access release version of the game. Obviously, things will change and improve over time, hopefully, and I'll be documenting that as I go because this is a great fun game to play, and largely my impressions on the whole are extremely positive. This is an indirect sequel to Circuit Superstars. It's not Circuit Superstars 2, and there's a few reasons I think why for that. Firstly, it's focusing purely on karting, which is a very grippy vehicle to be able to race in, but it's also quite physical and manhandly, so it feels by default slightly more like an Arcadian game compared to Circuit Superstars. The other thing that I'd say as well is that the movement from top down to chase cam, the developers were saying that because it conforms to more karting games views and perspectives, like your Mario Kart, your Sonic and Sega All-Stars, all of those types of games, you've got chase cam everywhere. It's very rarely top down, and so this has made the game potentially more accessible to less sim racery gamers, if that makes sense. Now, that's an interesting ploy to try and open up the audience to a wider demographic, but it also changes how you go racing as a sim racer too. What I mean by this is that it changed my mentality, and this is an odd thing to bring up maybe for other gamers, but when you're in top down, you don't often get to see the competitors that are, say, like 3-4 seconds up the road, because you'll see flashes of them perhaps as they're going out of a corner as you're going into it. But when you're in chase cam, you see much more ahead of you what's on the road. And I was starting to zone in and focus on a competitor that might be 2 or 3 seconds up the road, going "Rrr," and trying to then almost cut corners to visually see me catch back up again. Whereas I was doing that less and felt much more emotionally in control of myself from a top-down perspective. This might be a very specific me thing, but yeah, I noticed that if a person in Karting Superstars gets a couple of seconds ahead of me, I start to want to chuck the cart in more and be much more physically aggressive with it, which normally ends up with me getting a mistake or a corner cut. But I didn't necessarily get that in Circuit Superstars. I felt more incentivized to be a cleaner driver. And I think that also carries across to the way how the AI are in Karting Superstars, and the fact that these karts are wider and chunkier, and you have to drive these karts more aggressively and physically in order to get the best times out of them. So again, you've got up to 12 AI in the game. The AI after lap 1 is really well put together. They're fast, they aim for the racing lines, they are aggressive, they will curb hop, they will take the mick up to the line possible for getting a corner cut without getting the corner cuts. But in lap 1 they're just smashing into each other because there's not enough room for everyone to get round all of the corners carefully. And so since the karts handle like more Arcadian, and you've got the AI jostling around and being a bit more bump happy, I found lap 1 was becoming a bit of a smash up for us. I felt like I was in a NASCAR race or a BTCC car rather than actually being in a kart game themselves. And if that was able to be smoothed out, and I feel like it's because the karts are slightly too wide maybe, I'm not sure. It's really difficult to go side by side, but all of the AI insist on doing so. So you've then got 4 or 5 AI that are missing like after the first lap and several seconds back. And unless you turn rubber banding on, which I never do really in these games, they'll never kind of catch back up again because everyone else is then in their stride. And we're talking like a couple of tenths of a second separating the whole field per lap, because the differences and minutiae in the way how you take a racing line in this game is really precise. So every tiny nuance matters. So from that being a slight negative compared to what I've experienced with Circuit Superstars, the positives in all of this is just how well the kart handles once you're up and running and you've survived the turn 1, lap 1 bumping. These karts are grippy, they feel more arcadey to me, but in a good way, because it will still, if you're trying to hang a wall of death around the outside of a tight hairpin, you will run out of road, you will have to brake, you will have to turn and scrub off speed. But what's interesting, having now taken this online and watched other cars going around and doing their laps, is that you can take a variety of different lines, and a lot of them are valid, because sometimes doing a wall of death round the outside slightly and scrubbing off less speed, because the acceleration in the karts is so quick, actually that becomes slightly more viable than taking the traditional, I'm air quoting this, racing line of trying to cut through the apex by going out wide and then kind of turning in much harder, scrubbing off more speed, but then taking a little while to get back up to that full speed again. It's really interesting. Sometimes there isn't a definitive best way of getting through things, and where I've been going toe to toe with people online who are taking different lines to me, but we're ending up with almost identical times. I'm like, I would never have gone that route personally, but I think that's probably because I'm so indoctrinated with open real wheel sim racing that in my head I don't think of those alternative lines as viable, whereas other people do. This then brings me on to what's currently lacking online, and it's because it's not been implemented fully yet, and that is any kind of collisions online in the netcode. Slipstreaming isn't implemented yet, but the developers have said that they're going to, and that's to try and combat the fact that because we're karting, there's no refueling and tyre changes, so therefore strategy and pitting is out of the window. So to try and add some kind of strategic elements into this, slipstreaming will be added in, that you can kind of bob your head down and pick up speed, which will be great, and I think that'll be a fantastic addition when implemented. Lord knows the racing is already close enough, so God knows how it's going to be once that's all in. I think it'll be an absolute swap position fest, which is great. And so long as everyone stays nice and clean, I think it will make the game infinitely more entertaining. But I do think it is a noticeable hole not having tyre wear and fuel strategies in this game, which is kind of a limitation of the genre that's been picked. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but it does feel like a very noticeable hole that is missing. The other thing that I will say is there is currently 6 tracks with a variety of different layouts on them. You've got time trial, which works quite nicely with ghosts dropping in for you to kind of race against. Online is currently just racing against other people's ghosts in real time, which is fine. And actually I think that's quite a viable mode to keep, where you can still have like just collisions and everyone ghosting on and off and doing a 10-lap race, because that was still very entertaining when you get people that are at the same kind of competency and pedigree that you are. If you're not a fan of driving online, then the single player experience is very much here and has been changed around quite a bit. You can build your own custom races, and I prefer doing that because I can do sprints versus like really long epic races where you get into a real rhythm and almost generate your own Grand Prix, which is great. And so much of the changes that you can do for the amount of laps or time or kilometres that you race, and then the AI levels that are in the game and whether or not they've rubber banded is all there for you to tweak and change, which is great. Kartcade is the new single player kind of career mode, and it gives you procedurally generated championships for you to then race in to try and win. There's 2 specific things that are interesting here and that just need refining. The first is the procedural generation of the championship itself. Quite often I get the same track multiple times in a 3 or 4 track championship, and I'm not saying like forward and reverse or a club versus full version. I just get the same track and I'm like regenerate blurs, and that just feels like it needs a little bit more refinement. The other thing is that it gives you these bonus challenges to earn XP, but I think some of those challenges, like hit X amount of bollards, actually incentivises poor and dirty driving. And quite a lot of the challenges when they're generated are things that you can't physically do at that time. So while some of them are like do 1 penalty-free lap or 1 lap without contact, which I think is great, hit 6 bollards incentivises you driving off the track to do so. And whilst, yep, it can be potentially fun, I don't think that necessarily creates clean drivers, which then means that if you're ever going to have these people then go online, they're just going to smash into everyone in lobbies and probably cause pain for others. So I think it just pulls back to this kind of defining the identity of what this game is. Is this a simulation experience? Is it Simcade with a little bit of dabbling in Mario Kart? Or is it Mario Kart Casual dabbling in a little bit of sim? And those last two might sound like they're the same thing, but when you're speaking to a vast different audience and trying to expand that, getting that communicated and right down to all of the fundamental parts of each game design is really tricky to get right. And so it's about being consistent in the world that you're creating. So if we want to incentivize clean driving, for example, then perhaps having people driving off track to hit bollards like a slalom is perhaps not the best idea. This game, though, from its driving to the way how it's set up to the just general gleeful feeling that I have playing it, is an absolute chef's kiss, and I'm delighted to say that lightning looks like it's struck twice with this team and the way how they build their games. If I'm looking for things to improve for the future, yes, it would be great when that slipstreaming function is fully integrated and in the game. I think that will be absolutely great. But for me, I wouldn't be focusing on vehicles, I'd be focusing on tracks personally, because now that there's no strategy in this game, it's all around learning the different tracks and how to get around them faster and shaving hundredths of a seconds and thousandths of a seconds off your lap times and being consistent. So whilst I would appreciate having a baby kart and a superkart, that's all I'd probably be looking for in this. Then you've got the 3 different speeds of karts. That kind of puts it on par with other kind of karting games that are out there. Then it's all about focusing on tracks, because that's what will incentivize me to come back more, have more variety in the cartcade experiences, but also bring variety to online and the competitive scene that no doubt will be a small niche in this game, but a crucial one to continue to have it in the spotlight of your YouTubes and your Twitches that are out there. But yeah, on the whole, big thumbs up from me. Really excited to see this bit developed further. And great to have another racing game that I can just unwind and chill to whilst feeling like I'm still getting a little bit of a sim racery grind through at the same time. So yeah, double thumbs up. Any comments or questions, leave them down below. Take care. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.